For many years, I have found Sean to be a constant source of fascination. To me, his mind seems to work a little differently than other people, allowing him to identify areas and structure trading techniques around them that are simply beyond the imagination of many traders. A truly rare gift. Today, I get the privilege to dive deeper into one of these ideas that has ultimately transformed the industry.
All right, so we talked a little bit about why the wobble technique is a technique and not a strategy. But what makes the wobble technique so effective?
That's another great question, Dave. I think to answer that, let's go back. We talked a little bit about the evolution of my trading career and how I look at the markets and how I've evolved over time. And I think the start of the wobble technique, goes back to the early 2000s. I was really diving into price action development. Charts have been coming out, in the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of charts development in the chart arena started coming out, and you could really start to look at how price action formed. And so I was looking at just a simple 3-bar reversal pattern. And in a simple 3-bar reversal pattern, you have a very defined trigger and a very defined stop. The stop is at the low of the apex bar, and the trigger is the high of the apex bar. And so what you have in a scenario like that is your entire risk in that trade setup is the difference between the high of the apex bar and the low of the apex bar. Very simple trade, right? So what I was trying to learn is there a better place to enter that 3-bar reversal? Is it better to start at the low, or what I perceive to be low? Well, the problem with that is it's low probability. Is it better to wait a few seconds after it crosses the high of the apex bar? Well, the problem with that is you decrease your income, right? So there's a lot of give and take that I was looking at in this setup. If I set up down here, I give up this. If I set up here, I give up that. And so there's this give and take. And then it occurred to me, what if what if I take half my position and enter early, and the other half and enter when the trigger happens? And what I discovered when I did that is my risk, the amount of loss that I took overall in the trade, if I was wrong, decreased. Where I would be exposed to the entire difference, now I was only exposed to a fraction of the difference in my loss, if that makes sense. Because I'm getting in some down here, I'm getting in some up here. So my overall risk is this instead of that. Makes sense, right? So that little discovery in my trading led to the start of what we call the wobble technique. I started then, chopping that max position size that we down into smaller pieces. So, if I was entering the trade in 2 lots, maybe I'd get into a quarter of a lot down at the low of the apex bar. If the apex bar didn't form, I just can't simply get out. And, I was at a very small amount of risk. But if the apex bar formed and the trade setup formed, instead of making, if I'm triggering in here and my target's up here, now I'm triggering in here and my target's up here, you can see the max income is increased, right? Right. And my loss has decreased. So that's really the essence of what the wobble technique is we're trying to ease into the market at small at first, and then as that trade forms, build into longer or bigger positions. And what that does is it maximizes the amount of return that I get on that trade, but at the same time minimizes the amount of risk. And as a trader, that's what you want. You want to maximize your returns, minimize your risk. And so what the Wobble Technique did for me back in those early days is accomplished both of those objectives in the market. Now it evolved over time,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So instead of, I remember the next real aha moment for me is that the market came down to form what I perceived to be the reversal pattern. But instead of a 3-bar reversal, I got an 8-bar reversal, right? So the market came down, got stuck in a sideways pattern, and I'm entering my first stack at the lows. It's going up to almost where I'd be triggering in, and then comes back down. And it did it like so many times, And then I thought, why am I just sitting here waiting for this? I could be taking profits every time that thing goes up, comes back down, it goes back up, take some profit. Comes back down, buy some more. Take some profit, goes back up, comes back down, buy some more. And so I learned that long before the trade ever triggered, the reversal pattern triggered, I could be booking, serious amount of return just in the sideways consolidation pattern. And that's where the actual wobble started forming. Rather than just entering in layers, I would enter layers, take profits off. If the market went against me, I'd also, close out of some of my losses for a break even and then get in at a better price and so forth. And that's kind of the start of how the wobbling technique started forming.
Oh, that makes sense. So basically you're not waiting for the trade to trigger or the trade to hit your take profits. You're taking little sips out of the market.
Little sips, yeah, just like some hot chocolate, which is what I wish we had right now. Nice fall day like this, a little hot chocolate, a little sip out of the market, just like trading.
Yeah, and but that happens all the time, right? And so while we're waiting, most of us are waiting for our trades to trigger, you're taking the profits.
Yeah, that's part of it, right? If the opportunity lends itself to take profits, I'm going to take the profit out of the market. Okay. Just going to sip a little bit of here, readjust my position, build back onto it. Meanwhile, I've been in trades where I've made more in the reversal pattern setting up than I have on the breakout and the actual trigger of the setup. So that's a great accomplishment, right? If you can make more money in the setting it up than you do when it triggers, man, that's even better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just astounded that through your experience trading, that you had all these aha moments that culminated into what we have today as the Wobble Technique. But yet you've simplified it to where you're teaching brand new traders this technique, and they're getting it in less than an hour.
Well, it just makes sense, right? I mean, if you've got some profit on the books and you see this long consolidation where it's just coming up to the tops, pulling back down, it makes sense to just take some money off the table, right?
Why not?
Same thing, if you can get, if you're triggering in a normal trade setup, it just makes sense to trigger in a little bit earlier with a little bit smaller position, and reduce your risk and maximize your income. That just makes sense. So I think a lot of it just boils down to common sense. What does this make sense in the market? Traders, for whatever reason, they like to complicate things. And I found that, just taking a step back and keeping it simple is by far the best technique.
Yeah, don't overanalyze, just keep it simple.
Yeah. I think one thing I want to emphasize too is the original setup. The only time I'll use this technique is when I have a setup. So setups should have a high probability of triggering. So already before you enter into your first stack, you enter your first stack into the market. Long before you enter the first stack, you have a high probability setup. And that's important.
Yeah.
You can't use this technique on some random whim. You have to have a reason for getting into the trade. And that initial strategy, that initial setup is key to the success of the Wobble Technique. And that's really important because, again, I think a lot of new traders, they look at the way I trade and they don't see the initial setup.
So understanding your entries and exits is pivotal to your success in anything, but most importantly with the Wobble Technique.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate, on behalf of myself, because I love it, and everybody else that has said, thank you. I appreciate you coming, sharing your knowledge on the Wobble Technique. Your wealth of knowledge has greatly affected my personal trading, and I know a lot of others have benefited from it.
Oh, you've been a fast learner. You picking it up fast.
Well, I appreciate it. And can somebody get this guy some hot chocolate?
When I get into a trade, I'm sequentially going through 4 objectives. First, mitigate risk. Next, put on and take off positions to break even. Then, book a little profit. This is our goal, to book profits waiting for the one to break. Finally, maximize your return. This is where the bulk of your profit is at.